So the crash at Indianapolis the Indianapolis 500 in 2015, it's a big turning point in your career. But summarize your career up to that point in Indy.
So I spent after 2011, we won Rookie of the Year. Thought everything was great. They said, "Yeah, we want to sign you again." And then the team called me like December 1st and said, "Hey, we're going out of business. We're done. You don't have a ride anymore."
Damn.
I was like, "Damn it!" It was going so well. And then, obviously the worst thing in the world in the end of 2011 at the last race, we lost Dan Weldon in an accident, and he had been pegged to drive the GoDaddy car with Danica moving over to NASCAR, and never in a million years thought that I would have been thought of as a potential, fill-in for that seat. But it kind of came down to me and one other guy, and I got a call from Michael Andretti and said, like, "Hey, we want you in the GoDaddy car." And that was a tough thing for me in a lot of ways. And, I called, I knew Dan's sister really well, and I called her and I talked to the family about it a little bit. It was just a weird deal, especially that young in my career. And got that ride, had a lot of success, did 3-year stint with Andretti, won a couple races. And then we had a sponsor. We had in the middle of a contract, a sponsor kind of went out of business, and it happened late in the year. We didn't have a backup sponsor, so I had to switch teams, and I moved over to Schmidt-Peterson Motorsports in 2015. So that was my first year with the new team when we went to Indy for the first time together, and that happened.
So tell us about that. Tell me about that crash. What you remember about it?
Luckily, nothing. We were practicing. It was the Monday after qualifying. We were practicing, just doing some race running. I was running around behind Montoya in a nice big tow, and we had a suspension component fail in the middle of turn 3 at about 225 miles an hour, and it just torpedoed the car straight into the wall. And that's bad on a good day. But on a bad day, on top of just hitting the wall like that, a piece of the suspension actually fired through the tub of the car rather than just crumpling. It's like, you push an egg end to end, it won't break. It hit that perfect angle where the suspension didn't fold. It just shot through the car, and it went straight through me. I got shish-kebabed by an A-arm.
Where exactly?
An A-arm. Holy crap.
Well, so it kind of went in. It went in kind of right under my right butt cheek, and then kind of like up and out my left hip.
Wow.
And it was
all
like
the way through?
It was like stuck in me. So it stuck into the other side of the tub. Uh-huh. So it was like the one end was sticking out of the tub on one side, and one end was jammed into the tub on the other side. And it was
all the way through you.
Yeah. I was Hinchcliffe.
Holy cow.
Yeah, I see what you mean. You were impaled.
Yeah, I was quite literally shish-kebabed. And what the real issue was that it hit the femoral artery in my left leg, and so I was bleeding out very quickly. And the safety team arrived on the scene, and there are no amount of words or praise I can give that group of people. They literally saved my life. It was a very unique, bizarre injury, not something they really had a lot of training or protocols for, because it just doesn't happen. It's just not something that happens. But they are all professionals. They thought on their feet. They got me out of the car. They got me straight in an ambulance. Like, we skipped the med center. We went straight to the hospital. They were just trying to keep blood in me because they didn't know where all the holes were, right? Because it was sort of a weird scenario.
Do you know?
And so they're trying to.
Do you know how they got you out? Like, what do they like?
Yeah.
They pull that piece of suspension out of the car and then they pluck you out of there? What's the?
Yeah. So, like, if anyone listening knows anything about, being impaled by things, the general rule is you're supposed to leave it in until you get to the hospital. Right.
Because it plugs the hole.
Right. The problem is, and you could do more damage taking it out. Sure. And then if you're like on the scene, but they didn't know that I'd been impaled, and I was conscious, but very concussed and not making any sense. And I guess my body was in such shock. I couldn't verbalize what was wrong or what had happened. And so they said they went to go pick me up out of the car, and they're like, "Man, he's heavy. This is weird." And they're like, "All right, well, let's just get the spreaders out and try to open maybe the seats, the seat and the impact, the tub maybe folded in a bit, and he's kind of crunched in his seat. So they get the spreaders and over the cockpit opening, they kind of spread it. And they said they heard this loud pop, like this huge release of pressure, which we now know was the other end of the A-arm out of the tub. But they didn't know at the time. And so they put their hands under me again to pick me up. And someone's like, why is it so warm? And they take their hands out and they're covered in blood. And like, we've got to get him out of this car. We have no idea what is happening. We need to get him out of this car. So they just pulled me out. And as they pulled me out, the suspension stayed in the car. Ouch. And so they pulled me off it, and they pulled me out, and they hear this thud. And the guy's like, oh, my radio must have fallen off my belt. And he looks down and he sees the A-arm sitting in my seat in a pool of blood. And they start to piece together what happened. Yeah. And they're like, oh, this is bad. And so, yeah, they were just getting me they were pumping blood in as fast as they could. I was just dropping it even quicker. So I had 22 units of blood put into me on the way to the hospital. My body only holds 11. So I had 2 full oil changes, before they got me in the OR.
There was no way for them to try to minimize the blood loss. So you're losing blood and they're just pumping it in there.
They were trying. They were like packing holes with stuff, but it just kept coming out because they were big holes by that point.
When do you what do you recall getting your memory back on things? Were you in the hospital? Like when you first sort of get your memory back?
Yeah, so the last thing I remember is kind of crossing start-finish line at the start of that lap. Then it all goes blank. And my next memory is I'm staring up at 6 bright lights, 10 very concerned people staring down at me. I'm on a backboard and a neck brace. I have a tube down my throat. I can't talk. So they give me a pen. I think to myself, like, this isn't good. I've been here before. This isn't a good thing. And they gave me a pen and a piece of paper. And that's how I had to communicate. And one of the guys there was actually Marco Andretti, a very good friend of mine, and he had come to the hospital, and so I was writing him on a piece of paper saying, like, hey, like, what happened? And he tried to explain it to me. And I'll be honest, man, it took me about 5 days before, whether combination of being concussed and probably on a lot of painkillers and just the bizarre nature of the accident. It took me about 5 days to really understand what actually happened. But it's funny, Marco still has that piece of paper that I was, talking to him on in the hospital that day.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So, wow. What were the injuries that you had to rehab from? So obviously, you can get the blood vessel fixed, you can get holes stitched up, but what was rehab like?
So yeah, rehab was, so honestly, as unlucky as that accident was, I was also super, super lucky because the injuries could have been so much worse. Once they got the artery buttoned up, it was really just a bunch of tissue damage. I didn't have any broken bones. There was nothing but just these holes that we had to, let heal. And so rehab for me, the doctors said, they're like, look, athletes make the worst patients, right? Because you guys just push yourselves. Like, that's how you're wired, is to do more and push harder, push faster, whatever. And he goes, I cannot stress this enough. You need to do nothing. Your body just needs to heal. You need to rest and do nothing. And it's so counterintuitive, for a competitive person. Like, you just want to do more. And so what I did was I made doing nothing a competition with myself. So like they gave me a pedometer, and so like, I was in hospital for about 2 weeks or 10 days, I think. 10 days I was in hospital, and then I finally got to go home, and they're like, okay, you're allowed to walk 600 steps a day to start. That's it. I was like, okay. So they're like, we need you to get some blood flowing, but you can't overexert yourself. So I'm like, all right. So I put my pedometer on, and I would get up and I would walk laps around my couch until I hit 600 steps. And I'd lay back down on my couch and be like, okay. And I would plan my day, my meals, my bathroom breaks over like how I could move as little as possible and do as little as possible. And I could like rate myself every day on that. And as soon as I could like keep that competitive side of me somehow engaged by doing nothing, it was great, and it worked well. And we were in a car 2 months sooner than the doctors thought we were going to be.
So do you have anything as a memento from that crash? Did you save anything?
So they wouldn't let me keep anything from the car or
darn.
anything like that.
I would have kept that
A-arm.
suspension A-arm.
Yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I wanted it. They burned it all, I think, as a biohazard at that point. But so the surgeon who was working at the track that day, who is the guy that flat out saved my life. He's, you know, the one that did the surgery on my leg and was there at the track, whatever. He tells this funny story. He was in the med center in the infield there. It was him and another doctor, and he was having like a post-lunch nap. He was just snoozing in his chair. And and my accident happens, and the guy sees it on the thing, and he could just tell that it's bad. And so he was eating those little peanut butter pretzel bite things with his lunch, and he said he threw one and it hit my doctor right in the middle of his forehead. And he woke up and was like, "Hey, doofus, get up, we got work to do." And so my doctor, because I wasn't allowed to keep anything from the car, he went and got me one of those things framed as the pretzel that kicked his butt into gear so he could save my life. So that sits in the office proudly.
That's funny. And Marco has the notes, which I bet are
Marco's got the note.
Hilarious to look at this point.
It's funny because so Marco, and you know, Dale, you probably follow him on social media and stuff. Kid loves to run, loves to tell people he's running. And so it was always this inside joke with us that he's always like busting out 5Ks and tweeting and Instagramming about busting out 5Ks, right? So I'm laying there in hospital. I'm like, you know, what happened? Am I going to be okay? Can I drive again? All these serious things. And then Marco says something like, you know, nice and sweet and uplifting and motivating to me. And I write back and I was like, "Don't worry, I'll be busting out 5Ks in no time." And he reads the note and he looks up at the doctor and goes, "He's fine. I'm going to head out back to the track."
That's great.